Take a person, take a story, take you on a journey. It's your take.
You might have heard my guest's dulcet tones when listening to the radio or watching an advert on your TV. My guest is a professional voiceover artist. She comes from a creative background and has many strings to her bow. My guest's career started in the late 1990s when she became the station voice for Surf 107.2 in Brighton. She went on to co-present breakfast shows for GWR FM and Galaxy 101 in Bristol. Her career took her to America, where for 2 years she was signed to an agency in San Francisco as a voiceover artist. In 2010, she founded the national podcasting platform Audio Enable and its not-for-profit arm, Radio in Schools. She went on to establish the British Academy of Voice Acting, where she used her skills and experience to coach people looking to work in her field. Today I speak to Melissa Thom. We discuss her theatrical background and life at drama school, how she got a break into radio, the secrets behind being a successful businesswoman, and what it takes to be a voiceover artist in demand. A beautiful sunny day on this Tuesday morning. A very warm welcome, Melissa.
Oh, thank you. That was quite the potted history. I was sitting there thinking, gosh. But yes, you're right. It is boiling outside, so sweltering slightly in here.
A plotted history on your background and the things you've achieved in your career so far. And we're obviously going to examine the story in your life in the next 60 minutes. Before we talk about using your voice as a tool in your career and your profession, and we talk about your time on the radio airwaves, let's go back to the very beginning, if I may. So to begin with, I wanted to ask where you were born and what your memories of childhood. Who are your parents? What do they do for a living? And do you have any siblings?
Well, that's a story in itself, possibly not for today. I was born in Reading, the glamorous town of Reading. I don't remember anything about it because I think we moved when I was just born. And then we moved, I think we lived in Wolverhampton for some time of it, and other places. And then when I was 4, we moved to Devon, just outside Totnes. And at the time, Totnes was a pretty alternative place, I would say. Crank's Food was from there. Conker Shoes, don't know if you've heard of Conker Shoes, but they're from there. It was quite, yeah, it was great and really creative, alternative upbringing, I would say, to put it mildly. So we lived in a little village just outside Totnes. So, quite a bucolic Devon country upbringing in some ways. My parents, my dad is from Liverpool, and he went to school with some of the Beatles. He was best friend of George Harrison, actually, at primary school. Oh, so wow. That's a nice little link that I love to roll out every now and again. But he came from a very poor background, and he won scholarships, I think, to go to, I think it's Lipper now, but it was called the Liverpool Institute for Boys, which is where Paul McCartney went. And then he went on and won a scholarship to Oxford. So his story is really rags, well, I'd say rags to riches, but maybe rags to kind of a little bit of money. So that's his background. And my mum is Mauritian. And for those of you that know me and my mum is completely nuts. So yeah, there's kind of those two sides to me. The sort of Scottish Liverpudlian French side, which was my dad, who loved to talk about books a lot. He was mortified that I do not know every king and queen of England. So that was kind of the conversation. And then there's my mum from Mauritius, who is very expressive, to put it mildly, and amazing cook, and kind of Indian Mauritian, really. So I'm actually half Indian, but I don't look it at all I mean, people think I'm Italian or maybe Portuguese or Spanish. Nobody thinks I'm half Indian. So I kind of like that in a weird way.
An intriguing background so far, with the Liverpudlian influence and the Mauritian side as well. And I love the fact that you mentioned George Harrison, who's a huge hero of mine. Let's move on to your education. Can I ask where you went to school, and were they happy times in your life? And at a young age, did you have any career ambitions?
Yeah, I went to school at Torquay Girls Grammar. Anybody that went to school with me would probably say that I don't think I was a wallflower. Let's just say that. I sort of had a crazy level of confidence, which definitely sort of spilled over into cockiness, quite loud. But, you know, from the minute I was born, I really wanted to kind of get out in the world. And in terms of ambition, head girl at Torquay Girls Grammar School. That in itself was funny because I was always in trouble, but you know, the teachers were lovely. They were really lovely people, and I was never bad. I was just naughty, I think, most of the time. So ambition, I've always been ambitious to just get out in the world. I'm not sure that I was ambitious in the sense of let's knuckle down and study. I think my generation were really into partying. And then studying, we just sort of did on the side and got through and did what we needed to do. And I don't regret that at all. You know, I had the most amazing time all over the world, dancing and doing all sorts of interesting things. Sometimes I say to my husband, have I actually done all this stuff? Because even just listening to you this morning, I was like, I've done all that. And that's, you know, just the tip of the iceberg if you don't include the traveling that I've done. So, yeah, ambitious in the sense of I just wanted to get out in the world. I could never have foreseen me staying in Devon forever. Nothing wrong with that. I love Devon, but I definitely remember thinking I want to get out of here as soon as possible and go everywhere.
Grammar school educated, head girl, clearly academic and somebody wanting to seize an opportunity. Let's talk about finishing school. You went on to study a degree in English literature. Where did you do your degree, and what made you decide to study English literature as your subject of choice?
Well, I love English. I was never a straight A student, perhaps surprisingly, because I did all my work right at the last minute. You know, all my exams were sort of crammed in a week. But a lot of us did that, not everyone anyway. And I always loved English, but I was never going to get into a great course on my, I think 2 Bs and 2 Cs I got for A levels, which I think are perfectly great. But anyway, and so I ended up going to Leicester University, which had a really brilliant English course, but I got in on combined studies. So I did combined studies for a year, and then I was thinking, this is not happening. Although I did do history of art for a year, and I absolutely loved that. And then I just thought, well, I'm just going to go and speak to the English department and see if I can just join on their course. And it was fine. I just did that. And so I got into the English degree in the second year. It was a tumultuous time, I would say. A lot of people that I knew that went to uni at the same time, we all complained a lot about it. You know, I had 4 hours a week contact time, which is insane. But on the other side of it, I wasn't paying for it. I had everything paid for because I was from a single parent family. And I mean, I just remember having quite a lot of cash at university. I used to get grants, loans, and I used to use those to travel. So, you know, on one sort of hand, uni was a funny time. I'd left home quite young. And so the idea of getting to uni and drinking 2-litre bottles of cider at 18, when I had been doing that maybe a couple of years before, seemed kind of, you know, maybe I was just a bit stuck up and I wanted to go kind of partying and stuff. So, you know, then I met all the lecturers from the design team at De Montfort Uni and went out with them. So it was a great time. Now that I look back, I realize it wasn't bad. I had some brilliant experiences. I met great friends from Paris and Germany. They're still DJing and we're all the same age. And I'm thinking, I hardly get out. And they're, you know, posting pictures all the time with their 2 kids are at home or whatever, and they're out DJing in Berlin. I'm thinking, how do you do it? I'm exhausted. So I just had the best time. Drum and bass was huge when I was at university, so I loved all that. But I was also into the dance music scene, so driving up and down the country, just loved it. Met loads of great people, and I actually did a year in Italy as well, which is ridiculous. I was studying English literature in English in Italy for a year. Completely nuts.
Where were you? Whereabouts in Italy?
It was in Torino, Turin.
Oh, yeah.
So that was also interesting. I got everything stolen when I arrived. So I couldn't get somewhere to live because in England we didn't have ID cards. So it's not something that we grew up with. But whereas in Europe, you're supposed to carry them. So then I couldn't get a flat. It was just, honestly, it was just a big kind of year of angst, but I got through it. And I ended up studying Wordsworth in Turin in this kind of professoressa's apartment. And she was more English than the English. She was sort of drinking her tea, a bit like, and we discussed Wordsworth a lot. And we discussed the word sublime a lot. So much so that I don't even know what it really means anymore.
Travels formed a huge basis of the interview so far, but you started off in Leicester with an English degree and then went out to Italy. You then opted to stay in education and you enrolled in the Bristol Old Vic, where you studied acting. Can you just discuss your time at acting school, what you learned from the experience, and what was your goal when you finished your studies?
So that's interesting because I didn't actually go to Bristol Old Vic until much, much later, more recently, actually. So there was a big bit of time in between me finishing my degree. I didn't go to Bristol Old Vic till I was 40. And it is so ridiculous, that story, because I live 5 minutes from Bristol Old Vic. And it took me moving to California and getting involved in voice acting in California and acting there, that I came back and thought, hang on a minute, Bristol Old Vic's around the corner. I only did a foundation course there. I didn't do a BA or an MA or anything like that. And I just, I would never have done that. I would never, ever, if I'd stayed in England, would I have said at 40, I'm just going to call up Bristol Old Vic and see if I can just go and do some stuff. But because I'd been in California for 2 years and I do have an abundant attitude of, you know what, why not? And that just was so supported in California because I just loved every second of being there. And everybody in California acts, everyone.
Let's face it as well, we only live once as well. It's a pretty short life, so you've got to make the best of it and the best of your opportunities as well.
Every single time. And sometimes you don't ask, you don't get. These are things I roll out to my kids all the time. You get out what you put in, and they're like, okay. But I just came back to England and I, wasn't quite sure what I was going to do after being in America. So I just thought, well, I'll see if I can just do this foundation course in acting. It'd be good to get some sort of, some traditional training and theory and meet some people. And so I turned up on the first day and everyone was literally 18, 19, 20 max. But I couldn't care less about that. I think everyone was, just trying to work everyone out to begin with. Well, trying to work me out, but actually we all got on really well. And the teachers were amazing. The people I was studying with were just great. We're all still friends. Many of them have now come through BRAVA as well and trained as voice actors with me. So yeah, what great experience. And I think sometimes in England, we tend to think we can't do that because we're not at RADA or we aren't proper actors. That's something I get from people a lot coming through the voice acting academy is, well, I'm not a proper actor. I just do a bit of this. And there's just this, it's just in England, we just put ourselves down so much. And I know that the way that we view some Americans is that they go to the opposite extreme. But if we could just go somewhere in the middle and just feel the fear and do it anyway, and just try, you might actually get a lot from it. So that experience was brilliant. Would I do it again? Absolutely not. Would I pick up the phone and go back and do that whole course again now that I'm 45? No, but I am so glad I did it.
Can we pick up on your time in America? Because the theme of travel is coming up again. You studied acting at the American Conservatory Theatre in San Francisco. Can you tell us a bit about your time there and how you found America, and particularly these cultural differences from life in England and then life in the USA?
Well, I'm just, despite everything that's gone on, okay, there's a huge caveat. We know that in both countries. I love America. I had the best time, but I think my attitude when I got out there was, this is not going to happen again. I am not going to get 2 years, to just do what I want in America. So I kind of completely went for it. I'd phone my husband up and say, can you pick up the kids tonight? And he'd be like, why? I'm like, I'm going to Mexico. And he's like, who with? I'm like, I don't know, just I need to go. So it was, we made that work. But yeah, how we got out there is a whole other story. So my husband and I have run a number of startups. Funnily enough, mine was the sort of more unsuccessful one, and his was the successful one. So in 2014, his startup became part of Twitter, and Twitter took us out to California. So that's how that crazy story went. Even just telling you now, it's almost weird. I can't even, it just goes to show, he is very, very talented and amazing. But if we can do that as a couple, then anyone can do anything, basically. So we got out to California. We had 2 very young children. And I remember, I didn't even know what I was going to do. It was just kind of like, okay, let's just pack up. We just bought a new house, moved into a new house 6 months previously and renovated it. And then my husband came home and said, shall we go to California? And I was like, okay, let's pack everything up. Let's take the kids. And we arrived. And we got my eldest son, he was only 6 at the time, into this lovely school. And I remember going to do the playground pickup. Going to be honest, not a fan of it in the UK, not a fan of it in America. So I'd always have my sunglasses on. And anyway, everyone was just lovely. And you'd stand in the playground and chat to the parents, and I'd be like, oh, they'd say to me, what are you doing? And I'd say, nothing, I've just arrived. I'm picking up the kids from school. And then I'd say, what do you do? And they'd all say, oh, I work for Pixar, I work for George Lucas. And you'd be like, of course you do. Of course you do. So, and one day I was chatting to one of the dads who worked at Pixar, and I showed him, I had a working visa, which had arrived in the post, but I hadn't really had time to process it. And I said to him, oh, this arrived in the post last week. It's a working visa, which we got through Twitter. And he said to me, do you know how lucky you are to have that? And I said, nope, no idea. I haven't even thought about it. And he said, my wife's been in America 15 years and she can't work. So then I went back home and said to my husband, actually, I really want to make the most of this. And that kicked off a whole process of getting involved with the voice acting industry. And Elaine Clark, my dear friend, who has just been an incredible presence in my life and made America, partly made America really, really enjoyable. So does that answer your question?
It does indeed. I want to kind of go back in time, annoyingly now, and go back to the very beginnings of you working in radio. We now shift the clock back to 1999, when you became the station voice for Surf 107.2 in Brighton. How did that opportunity come about, and what made you decide to pursue a career in radio? Had you had any previous experience, and had you made a voiceover reel to send to radio stations?
To answer those last 2 questions, no, absolutely not. I was honestly, I don't even know if I could cope with me as an 18-year-old these days. I look back and I just think it must have been exhausting, but I had an inordinate amount of energy. And I was at university in Leicester thinking the Midlands is great, but it wasn't for me. And so I think after my first year, I got the train down to Brighton to see a friend of mine. She'd just moved there. I remember sleeping on her floor because she didn't even have a bed. And then she had a friend who was the newsreader at Surf 107.2, and we met in the pub, and then we got chatting, and I can't remember exactly how the connection went, but through him I ended up meeting the owner, Eugene Pereira, who's great. And honestly, best job I'd ever had. That was not a job, it was just like one big massive party. But the people I met were just, still in contact with a lot of them today, really creative, just fun. And I remember getting to Brighton and thinking, Brighton is a place of total misfits, which made me fit right in. And it was just so much fun. And no, I didn't make a reel at that time. I mean, to be honest with you, and I talk about this a lot because at BRAVA, I work with a lot of radio and TV professionals, broadcasters, and we talk about this a lot. You know, most of us just fell into it. There was no plan. It was just, I'm in Brighton for the summer. I need a job. Radio sounds great. It was a commercial radio station. It was independent. You know, Fatboy Slim had a show there. Remember, there was a show called Catskills. There were drum and bass shows. Russ Dewberry from the Jazz Rooms had a show there. And I used to work down at the Jazz Rooms as well. So for me, you know, really into music at that time, it was just the best job. And I remember not giving it a lot of thought, but almost thinking, that's it. I'm on this trajectory into bigger and better things. And then, of course, you know, real life hit and you go into bigger corporations and it's different. It's not bad. It's just not one great big party like Surf was. So just massive smile on my face when I think about that time. It was so much fun.
Next, let's talk about your time in Bristol, because you went on to co-present breakfast shows for GWR and Galaxy 101. How did these opportunities happen? And can you share with us what skills and attributes are required to be a successful radio presenter and a co-host?
Well, first of all, I didn't work on GWR FM in Bristol. I was part of the GWR group and I did the show in Devon on Gemini FM. Okay. So I was there at the breakfast with John White there for 3 years. And Galaxy. So I'll talk about Gemini first. So I just went back to Devon for a couple of weeks in between things. And I remember thinking, well, I need to do something for 2 weeks. So I just knocked on the door of the radio station and sort of said, hi, do you need any help? And there was a guy there on reception, and I think he passed my details on, and I started doing a bit of work for them. And then in a very short space of time, I think they were just setting up a new breakfast show. John had been sort of the sole host there, and I think they wanted to bring in, you know, the crew. So they said, would you be interested in the breakfast show? And I kind of thought, well, I can't really turn that down, although wasn't planning on staying in Torquay for longer than 2 weeks. And I ended up staying 3 years, which was a struggle for me, but what a great opportunity, you know. And whilst behind the scenes, it's weird when you're a co-host, you start, and then I felt that I sort of became a parody of myself a little bit, but you know, looking back, I'm so glad I did it. I learned so much about radio. The breakfast gig was great. I remember doing panto as well for 6 weeks. So I was doing a breakfast show in at 6, leaving there at 11, going across for a matinee performance, staying at the Princess Theatre, then doing an evening performance, then going out every single night and getting hardly any sleep. But I loved it. Panto was brilliant. I loved it.
Busy times. What would you say are your standout memories from presenting on commercial radio stations? How would you describe working in the commercial radio world? And have you ever had any desire to work for an independent radio station, or perhaps for the BBC?
Well, I worked at Indie with Surf 107.2, which was a real highlight, as I've mentioned. How would I describe working for a commercial radio station? Well, at the time, I seem to remember that working for the BBC was kind of implicitly revered, and always thinking, oh, you know, maybe I should go over to the BBC. Now I am so glad that I worked in commercial all the way up, to understand the commercial opportunities and, you know, why, and understand the world of advertising, you know, especially as a voice actor now, and I voice for tons of global brands. What an incredible learning platform that was. So to understand why, you know, the commercial radio was there to make money, and that if the advertising wasn't sold, nobody would have a job, was quite an interesting process. And I know that many of my colleagues at the BBC maybe haven't had that experience if they haven't, you know, worked in commercial radio. So for that reason alone, brilliant. Also the people I've met. I mean, honestly, I'm not just saying it, but radio producers are the loveliest people in the world. I mean, they are just, I still work with so many that I've worked with for maybe 30 years now. And just super chilled, really lovely, have a chat, do the job, off you go. I mean, it's just great. So the people I've met, Also, a couple of radio mentors. So Steve Orchard, who used to be at GWR, he was on the sort of senior management team there, and just the most lovely person. And I do think of him as a mentor, really. He's always made time for me. I mean, I don't call him regularly, but when I do call him, we'll have a good chat. So, and when I look back now, I look back to things like boot camp that him and Dirk Anthony used to sort of head up. And I just think that was so lucky to get all that training. You know, it was really lucky. Even at the time, you know, I don't know if we all appreciated it as much as we should, but now that I look back, just what a blast, really. And the most important thing is the people I met.
Already we've touched upon your 2 years in America, how that opportunity happened and having a working visa. I kind of want to skip forward in the timeline many years to 2010 now, where you founded a national podcasting platform called Audio Enable and a not-for-profit arm called Radio in Schools. What made you decide to set up your own businesses, and have there been major challenges in doing this?
Yeah, you know what, Radio in Schools, at the time, I think I had been sort of working in the radio station, but I'd actually been running a literacy charity. Just I had a bit of a break from radio, but I was still in the radio station. So I kind of felt like I was still in radio. And then that sort of wound up. And I remember thinking, I don't want to go and work for someone else. I don't want to do that. I've never been the sort of person really to do that. And so I thought, and I met my husband at the time, who is a very skilled, talented designer, digital designer, a UX expert, blah, blah, blah. And I remember saying to him, I just wish we could have a big red button on the internet to press record and record audio. I just wish we had that. So of course, I don't know how it happened, but we just said, why don't we just do it? So we did. And he designed the most incredible software as a service, it was called at that time. I don't know if it still is. And I mean, I think he sort of took the idea and then kind of blew me away with what he did. And then I sort of thought, God, now I've got to back it up by running this. So we had the commercial element of it, which was Audio Enable, which we never did anything with really. And then we were offered funding from government and also funding from GWR at the time, but then in the middle of that, it got bought out by Global. And so in the end, we launched Radio in Schools with 32 heart stations as part of GWR/Global. And I remember Stephen Myron and Ashley Table kind of having a quick meeting with me when they kind of, when the acquisition happened, and saying, do we own you? I was like, no, we're an independent sort of charity, not for profit. And they just let me carry on. That, you know, they didn't even ask. So it was great. And again, you know, just worked with all the local heart stations, traveled the UK, launched Radio in Schools, took radio into schools. It was brilliant. It was really, looking back, it was our first startup. And I tell you something, we learned so much from doing that. I mean, I remember the government would invite me to things like a cabinet event. And at the time, there was no phrase of women entrepreneurs or women in business or even WeWork offices. I know they're not here anymore, but you know, that kind of entrepreneurism wasn't there. I was basically on my own in the bowels of the GWR building in an office that no one really knew what I was doing there, but I kept on going. And we ran that project for 3 years. We got funding in for 3 years. And then my husband and I had a baby. And at that point, I was like, we either seriously look at what this is and carry it on, or we look at it and say, it's been great for 3 years, but we're gonna stop it. And that's what we did. And just as we did that, my husband set up another startup. And that's the startup that was only 2 years old when he kind of let it go. But that was the one that took us to America.
Very much an entrepreneurial spirit, yourself and your husband. Let's talk about, we've spoken about those business ventures, and now let's move on to coaching and training others in voiceover work. Have many of your students gone on to build successful careers in the voiceover world? And can you also discuss forming the British Academy of Voice Acting?
Yeah, so we have a lot of students that are working as voice actors. Obviously, we don't take people on with a view to them not doing it. There's no voice acting. The process of learning it is actually quite a set process. but you need that guidance. So we have talent, we call them talent because student to me sounds weird, talent that work in broadcasting, commercial voiceovers, narration, e-learning. So that's great. Remind me the second part of your question.
Yeah, it was what made you decide to again go into setting up your own business again? What made you decide to form the British Academy of Voice Acting?
Do you know what we said after the second startup and burnout? Because trust me, what you hear from us is the kind of cherry on the cake bit, and of course it's great and the experiences were amazing, but trust me, it was full on, and that is no understatement, and burnout is definitely real. So after all that, we decided to come home from America, which I'm sure we'll talk about later, and I worked as full-time as a voice actor, which was great. And then just before lockdown, I kept getting quite a lot of calls and emails and LinkedIn messages saying, have you ever thought of teaching? And I was thinking, there's plenty of people out there to do it. You really don't need me to get in on the scene. And then I remember, I think it maybe just lockdown had just happened or something had happened. And I remember speaking to a group of my acting friends, and they just looked so down, so dejected. There was nothing happening. And I just said to them, do you know what? Why don't I just do you a course in voice acting? And it kind of kicked off from that. And then BRAVA just took on a life of its own. I'm not kidding. I mean, I don't think I woke up at 4 one morning and said to my husband, oh, it's there. The business plan is there. Ran downstairs, wrote it on one piece of paper. 2 weeks later, we were up and running. So, and it's just grown from there. I mean, I've hardly had time to blink, and, we're full basically. We've got people on waiting lists, and it's great. I love every single second of it. And coaching, I think, comes quite naturally to me in terms of, especially when it comes to coaching people who have had professional careers in broadcast. My husband's TV background, I'm obviously radio background, but I've also worked as head of comms for digital agencies. So understanding the commercial need again and understanding it from clients' points of view is really important. Startup, I've had experience with that. So actually, when you put it all together, it becomes something quite meaningful when you're coaching people. So I love it.
From teaching and coaching and setting up yet another business venture, let's talk about your work as a voiceover artist. And can I ask you, what skills and attributes are required to be a voiceover artist and to get regular work? Do you have a home studio set up, and what does that consist of? And the last part of my question, what does a normal week entail? And can you discuss some of the projects and clients you've worked with? And do you have any favorites and why?
You may have to remind me of some of those points as we move through, but
100 questions in one.
Like, okay, so what skills do you need to be a successful voiceover artist or voice actor? I call myself a voice actor for a number of reasons, but let's just go with VO artist for now. So number one, tenacity, and I am not kidding. It's like anything. You've got to hustle, you've got to grind, you have to not take too much notice on what other people are doing. And, there is a lot of bollocks in the industry, in every industry. And so you just have to either use it to motivate you. Remember that those talking most on social are usually the ones that aren't that busy, because when you're busy, social, honestly, is the one thing of my life that I hate. I just think, why am I even doing this on Instagram? It's just pointless, but I have to do it. And so, it's not a natural thing to just keep talking about what you're doing, because, if you want to you need to listen to people. And actually, although they say social is about listening, I don't see many people listening. I see a lot of people talking about themselves. I do it on, if you see my personal channels, it's just, here's a picture of a cake because I think it looks really nice. I'm just like, I'm not going to put all my VO work on. Who's interested in, some of it I do. So Grand Theft Auto 5, obviously that was going to go on, but do I put every single commercial job I do on social? No, nobody cares. So that is something I struggle with, but it's an important part of the job. And with social, as a voice actor, you either decide to do it fully not taking my own advice here, or you don't do it at all. I kind of sit somewhere in the middle. With BRAVA, obviously, we do it, but I don't mind with that because I'm talking about other people. I'm talking about our talent, and they're fantastic and interesting and vibrant people. I'm not going on every day saying, hey, look at me. Hey, here's a set of headphones. Look at me again. Hi, here's me from the other point of view with the headphones. There is only so much you can do with a mic and a set of headphones. So anyway, maybe I went too deep into that, but tenacity, just focus on you, focus on the work, don't give up, don't take no for an answer. Honestly, I can't tell you the amount of clients that I've maybe spoken to 3 years ago, you know, pitching them for work, and then 2.5 years later, they'll remember me or find me somewhere, and then I'm working for them and they send you loads of work. So always remember it's about the hustle. That's probably my main piece of advice to be a success in anything actually these days. But I can't talk about any other applications because I can only talk about voice acting. So yeah, second part of your question, home studio.
And what does that consist of? And the last part was, in a normal week, what kind of projects do you work on in terms of your clients as well? And are there any favorites? And if so, why?
Okay, so home studio, I am very lucky indeed. My husband, who is amazing. When we got back from America, he sort of just needed to do something as usual. So he decided to convert, we've got sort of a garden studio thing, and he converted it into a professional voice booth. And I am not kidding you. I'd walk in and he's like, I've just constructed this sound treated window of 3 different panes of glass at 3 alternative angles. And I'm like, what are you doing? You are mental. This is overkill. I do not need this. I just need a cupboard. Anyway, ironically, had he not built this for me, there's no way I'd be running BRAVA now. So I have a control room, which is what I'm sat in now, as you can see it. And then I have a beautiful sort of wooden glass sound treated window consisting of 3 panes at different angles. And then on the other side of that, I have a voice booth, which is all treated. So yeah, I have a pretty dog's dangly setup, if I'm going to be honest with you. And next bit.
Yeah, and in a kind of usual week, how many sort of projects would you juggle and work on? What sorts of things will you be recording? And do you have any sort of memorable projects and favorites at all?
So many. I mean, it all does come down to the team that you're working with. One of my favorites has got to be GTA 5. I'm really sorry to say, but it was just, I didn't even know what it was for. You know, it just happened so quickly. And I ended up, the producer was the guy who is the brains behind GTA 5. So having that experience was incredible, and I'm really proud of it. All came from people I knew in America. But, you know, that's a big gig. Whereas actually the day-to-day gigs, you know, the corporate narrations, I work with some fantastic producers. I did a job for Omega Watches recently. And the Seamaster, I know lots of people who are divers, and you know, they go on and on over the years about the Seamaster, and it was fascinating. I narrated a series of films and I was really interested in it, and the producer was amazing. And at the end of it all, he said to me, and I don't fish for compliments at all, because you get in, you do the job, you go out, but he offered this up and he said, you're like the voice in my own head when I'm writing scripts. And I said to him, do you know what, that is probably the best compliment you could give me, so thanks very much, I'll take that. So it was just
a testimonial for the website there.
Absolutely, I get it on there. There you
Gold,
go.
Yeah.
But yeah, so I mean, but also I do quite a lot of experimental stuff as well. So there's a friend of mine, Richard, who I work with, and he's into AI. Let's not go down that rabbit hole, but we've done some great stuff, and Kerry Harrison as well, where they programmed something to spit out Sylvia Plath. This is just one of the projects I've done with them, poetry, and it was actually quite good. So it was really good. So we ended up having a poetry performance, and I went to read the poetry, and I love all that stuff, you know, the actual reality of being a voice actor in person with other people is lovely. So I kind of apportion a small amount of my time to do experimental projects, and it doesn't matter about the cash on those or the recompense for that, or remuneration, I should say. It's more about, are these people doing something interesting? Can I help them? So, you know, if you've got any interesting projects, give me a ring. I'm more than happy to help.
we've established today that you've done so many different things, worked across several areas and disciplines, from radio presenting, voiceover work, hosting, acting, coaching, marketing, communications, which we've not explored in any depth, and running your own businesses. Do you have a favorite area? And if so, why? And are there any creative areas you haven't explored that you would like to maybe sometime in the future?
So working in marketing communications was essential for what I do now. I've got a master's in marketing communications, in fact. Did I love it as much as my English degree? No way. I mean, just no way. It was such a different experience. It was a business degree. English literature, you just talk and you chat with people and argue about John Milton and John Donne and talk about ideas of what it means to be living and what it is to, you know, what humanity is. I mean, I could do that forever. I wish I could do another one, another 3 English degrees. Marketing communications was really, there was a recession, and I remember my husband and I were like, okay, things are really tight. And I just had a baby, and I said, you know what? I've got my baby, I'm breastfeeding every single day. Degrees can be done online now. So I did a Marcoms degree whilst I was on maternity, which looking back might have been some sort of postnatal thing going on there. But actually it was great for me because I was at home. You could access everything through a computer. When I did my undergrad, you just go to the library, there were no books left. You couldn't access anything. So then I went straight in as head of comms. Well, I actually became head of comms a bit later, but I went into a marketing role in a digital agency. And so I learned so much about that world then. But that was probably my least favorite element of it. So when I am delivering Marcoms for somebody else, I'm not sure I love it, put it that way. But when I'm delivering Marcoms for me, or my husband, I did some of the PR stuff on his startup, I love it. I mean, it's not even like work. I know exactly what I need to do to get the message out. So yeah, marketing is great when it's for yourself, when it's for someone else. There's a real skill to that. And that's why marketing and PR people are great at what they do, because they are able to listen to the client and deliver what the client wants, rather than saying, that's not right, you need to do it this way. So, I learned that about myself. The best bit, I don't know, the best bit, voice acting itself is brilliant. I love it. The actual art of getting in the booth and the performance technique and theory behind everything we do. But also, I think equally working with people that I respect and admire and bringing their confidence levels up. I mean, that's a lot of what I do, to be honest, is about working with confidence. And we're just revealing what's already there. So, I'll get these lovely messages from people saying, thank you so much for this, that, and the other. And I always say, look, we just worked and brought out what was already there. You're the one that did it. We didn't give you this stuff. We just helped you along the way. And when I was going through all this, there were no voice acting schools. There were no training schools. Everything that we deliver through BRAVA is a kind of, amalgamation of all of the life experience that myself and the other teachers at BRAVA have. And trust me, that is quite a lot of accumulated experience, both from this side of the Atlantic and from America. So yeah, teaching and acting, I love voice acting. I know I'm not a stage actor. I definitely proved that when I went to Bristol Old Vic. Voice acting is where I sit.
Is there a creative area that you've not worked in or explored in any detail that you think, actually, maybe in 5 years' time, 10 years' time, I wouldn't mind giving that a go and see if it tests me mentally and physically, and it might be something I want to just test out?
Yeah, I don't want to go too deep for the purposes of whoever may be watching or listening to this, but I'm definitely more interested in sort of personal growth, and making sure that, as much as I'm asking BRAVA talent to stretch themselves, we do quite a few exercises that are deep, I'm telling you, but they're always brilliant because they always result in something positive coming out of it. And I think I want to, I'm quite interested in ritual, experimentation. So there's a lot of kind of quite esoteric stuff that I'd like to get into, which isn't really directly answering your question, but I don't think it's a conversation necessarily for now.
Melissa, one final question, and then it's that time. we move on to the 13 quickfire questions that we've asked every single Your Take guest, and we always have some interesting answers and results. So we'll move on to that in just a moment. Before we do so, outside of your career, you have a young family. We've established that today. You're a married woman as well. You've spoken a lot about your husband, his influence, and working together on your various business ventures. But what do your children think about your work, and are they creative? And when you're not working, which I'd imagine is very rare, what are your interests and what do you like to do to relax and escape that kind of 9 to 5 or busy kind of creative working life?
Well, yeah, my kids, they are just ace. And I know everyone says that about their own kids, but honestly, they are just the happiest, bubbliest, brightest, shiny people I have ever met. And they are just such a joy. Honestly, you know, they are just the biggest huggers. Yes, they're creative. Both of them are voice actors, but I don't do anything outside my booth. So if anything comes in and it's in an outside studio, that's not the route that I am asking them to take. They do it because they want to do a bit of stuff in my studio, and that's fine. And it's really great. They love acting. You know, it's just a real joy to see them enjoy it for acting's sakes, not necessarily for the other reasons that can come in when you're a teenager onwards. You know, it's not about being loved, and it's not about being told you're beautiful, and it's not about being told you're great. It's just about expression. So that's the reason that they seem to love acting. They are creative. They are just little bunches of gorgeousness. What was the last bit of your question?
Yeah, I also wanted to ask, you mentioned your kids. What age are they, your children? And I wanted to ask what your interests are outside of your busy working life. What do you like to do to unwind and relax and kind of escape, you know, all the work you do, your business ventures, your creative work? What do you like to do to just escape all that when you can?
Well, to go back to their ages, I've got 2 boys. The eldest is 12 and the youngest is 8. And actually, you know, I know that many people perceive this to be a kind of crazy working life. It is busy, but I am very good now after going through 2 startups and all of that stuff, and my husband working Silicon Valley companies, blah, blah, blah. You know, we're definitely looking more to finding that balance, and you have to be so precious with your time. So my week is carved up very clearly into working time and admin time and non-working time and family time. And I am precious about that. You know, what comes at the top of that? Family time, without a shadow of a doubt. I mean, now that it's summer holidays, you know, we're all kind of going a bit nuts, but, you know, going swimming with my kids. We took them to the wave last week. We've taken them swimming in the lake. They play tennis. That always has to take priority, really. It doesn't always happen. I mean, obviously there are times when I say I've got to do this thing, but not very often these days, because I'm quite on it with the organizational thing. Plus, I've got an amazing business support person. I love him. He is amazing. Honestly, he's just brilliant. So he makes my life a lot easier. What do I do to relax? Well, over lockdown, it was mainly drinking wine. But now I have stopped that at last. So my husband and I, we did chub up quite a lot. Exercise, kind of let it go because we were so busy.
Why not? You couldn't escape the house, so you had to find something to do indoors. I know, didn't you?
Honestly, it got so bad. It got so bad. I just woke up and thought, that's it. So now I'm meditating in the morning, meditating in the evening, drinking water, no alcohol, yawn. But I am actually feeling really good. So yeah, hopefully that's going to last a bit longer than 2 weeks. Reading, God, it's so boring, isn't it? But reading, you know, books. If you get a book, you're transported to another world and you're in the mind of somebody else, and it can tell you something about yourself and you can learn about other people. I mean, just reading is what I try and do. I don't have that much time to read, but I try every week to carve out some time. I'm reading Jean Reese's autobiography at the moment, which is amazing because there's quite a lot of similarities with Caribbean islands to the island of Mauritius. So it's really interesting reading that. But it's annoying because I'll read a page and then think I'm getting really into this, and I'll fall asleep, and then the next day I'll reread the same page, and then I don't know where I am. So that's the reality of trying to read at the moment, but I'm just sticking with it.
Melissa Thom, we're finally here. It's that time. So I think we've interviewed nearly 80 guests so far, and at the end of the interview, we ask all of them these same quick questions. You don't need to think about these in any detail. It's like being in the psychiatrist's chair.
Oh my God, that sounds worrying.
Very worrying indeed. Number one, what would you say, Melissa, is your favorite pastime?
Oh, I just talked about it. Reading, probably. But, you know, like everyone else, we've been outdoor swimming over lockdown. So that is also lovely. Reading and exercise. That's it. It's so boring. What a boring answer.
Reading's been a common theme in today's discussion, from obviously studying it at university and your love of reading novels and so forth. But we haven't touched upon cinema. My next one, what is your favorite film and why?
I mean, how can you answer that? That's just ridiculous. You can't.
You can choose a couple if you wish.
All I can say to you is a film that I've watched recently that had the biggest impact on me. Can I do that? I can't give you my favorite film because I mean, it goes from Ferris Bueller's Day Off to Gladiator to, I mean, so many different films. I've been watching a lot of Taika Waititi's films lately. I love Hunt for the Wilder People. It's so good. I love Sam Rockwell's one of my favorite actors. So The Way Back is a great sort of teenage indie film. See, I can't answer it, but the film that I've watched recently that probably had the biggest impact on me was Portrait of a Lady on Fire. Have you seen it?
I know the film you mean. It came out about a year or so ago. I've not seen it.
Well, I can't say anything about it because I'll ruin it for you, but there's a scene in the middle, and I mean, maybe I loved it because I didn't have a clue what it was about. And then this scene came in and the music just blew me away. So yeah, that's all I can say. So that's the film lately that I've been thinking about the most. That's all I can give you.
I'll definitely give that one a watch. We come back to literature now. Who would you cite as your favorite novelist?
Oh, I just can't. I can't. Novelist. Well, I love Jean Rhys and Wide Sargasso Sea. I just love that it's a prequel to Jane Eyre. I love the fact that it's in the Caribbean and it reminds me so much of Mauritius. And maybe I'm sort of transposing myself into the story a bit. I also love the fact that it's about, you know, the mad lady in the attic, you know, that I can kind of identify with many members of my family. So, you know, just off the top of my head, but I mean, there's just so many. When I was at uni, it was magic realism was big at the time, which I know is sort of almost poo-pooed a bit now, but I still love Jeanette Winterson, Angela Carter. I just have such an affinity with those stories and the wild stretches of imagination that I just, love it.
You've done so many things during your life so far, and I'd imagine there's so much more to come as well. But if you could have had a different profession, what would it have been?
Oh, I don't know. I always thought I was going to work in TV, funnily enough. I remember having work experience at West Country TV and doing, was it Gus Honeybun who did the birthdays? I was doing like the streamers at the side, and I remember thinking it was going to be really amazing, and I remember getting there thinking, oh, it's really boring. I mean, I was really young, so I'm sure it was not indicative of what a wonderful career that is, by the way. But I just assumed I would go into TV, and I went to the Edinburgh TV Festival as a delegate when I think I was about maybe 17 with my best friend Emmeline, and that was brilliant. We met Mal Young from Brookside at the time, and Michael Gray did the McTaggart lecture. So just being immersed in that, I just thought this is where I want to be, but life just didn't happen that way. Would I change it? No way. I love what I'm doing now, and I wouldn't have changed anything that I've done, actually.
Melissa, who would you say in life has been your greatest inspiration?
Oh, it's going to sound super corny. It's going to sound ridiculous, but it is my husband. It's got to be my husband. He is just ace. He is continually inspiring. He's annoyingly brilliant at DIY, and that is not an understatement. He's clever. He's just gorgeous. He's a brilliant dad. Oh, he's just amazing. So yeah, my husband, I'm afraid.
Your husband and business partner.
Not
Next.
anymore. We don't work together anymore. We've
Okay.
done that. Yeah, I mean, I reel him in when I need him, when I need the big boys. But now, to save our marriage, I've got my amazing business support, who I always say, you are amazing. I've also got an amazing engineer who is the loveliest guy on earth. So yeah, we work together sometimes.
Something different now. I've spoken to a few journalists on Your Take, but can I ask you which newspaper you read, or if you read a newspaper? If so, which one?
Yeah, I do read newspapers. I complain about them an awful lot. One of my life's great joys is to get the Saturday and Sunday papers and to sit down and read everything and complain quite loudly in front of the children and my husband at how ridiculous this article is. So the Sunday Times magazine is a great example of, maybe 0.001% of people actually live that life. But the reality is a lot of us are pointing fingers at it going, this is ridiculous. Tablescaping, mantelscaping, what is it? Actually, my husband and I do love to buy Grazia magazine because it's brilliantly designed. And it's just so entertaining to see what's going on. But I buy the Sunday Times, but only for the culture magazine.
Yeah.
Very specific about this. I don't even read the paper because it's all, I read the culture magazine, which is brilliant. I do sort of flick through the Star magazine to sort of have a laugh. And then I do buy the Guardian, but lately, there's lots going on with that at the moment. Not entirely sure what I think about it anymore. Saturday, I'm thinking of giving up because nothing in it. Sunday, I love the New Review. Absolutely love the New Review. So it's the cultural parts, the cultural magazines that I love. And when I lived in America, I didn't have them and I really missed it. So now I realize how lucky we are to have them, even if they're not always brilliant. I used to love, oh God, it's a really terrible title, so I'm not going to talk about that because it sounds a bit, but I love a glossy magazine where you can read about authors or something.
Interesting you chose the Times, because my previous guest is a columnist for the Times. Ooh. So you may have come across him. It was Robert
Star magazine, I hope.
Robert Crampton, who writes
yes,
Mail. Yeah, he was my last guest.
Yeah, he's on the back page every single week of the Sunday Times magazine on a Sunday, I believe.
It was also a very fascinating interview with him. Oh. We talk about food next. What is your favourite food, and are you a bit of a cook yourself? Mauritian food, hands down, not kidding. It is the best food in the world. It is the best food in the world. It is so delicious. My mum is an amazing Mauritian cook. Whenever I go back to Mauritius, the street food is brilliant. I spent a couple of years on and off in India, and although Indian food is lovely when you're traveling with a backpack and no money, not so sure that lives up to expectations in that kind of way. But Mauritian food, hands down, my best food. And yes, I would like to call myself a good cook. I'm definitely more of a sort of throw it all together cook, whereas my husband is more, it's Tuesday night, let's put some tuna in a ramekin and put some parsley on the top. I'm like, what? So we're very different cooks, but we both love cooking. If you had to choose a favorite cultural icon or an influential figure, I don't know, who would you choose? Most guests can't become unstuck on this, so I always kind of help them by saying it could be somebody who's changed history in a way. They could have invented something, built something, done something. They could be entrepreneurial. They could be a political figure from history. I don't think I'm going to go that deep on this. A religious or spiritual leader. Well, I did go to Amaz Ashram in India, but definitely she's not top on my list for spiritual icon. She's great and everything, but slightly weird experience. I mean, is it really bad? I'm really obsessed with music biographies, by the way. So there's a publisher now called White Rabbit Books, and I haven't read their stuff yet, but I keep thinking I just want to take 2 months off so I can buy every book on there from them and just lie on the sofa in the garden and read it. But I remember reading Viv Albertine's biography and thinking I really like her. So from the Slits, do you remember the Slits? Yeah, I know them. Yeah. Is she a cultural icon? She is, right? She's from the Slits. So punk. Yeah. Anyway, for today, it's going to be her. There's too many to think of, but today I love what she talks about now, and
the kind of the difference in her life between when she was in the slits and the realities of being a, I don't know, 50-something woman now. So yeah, really enjoyed that.
Curse words now. What is your favourite curse word and why? And you can say it pre-watershed.
Well, I say it a lot. Fuck it, fuck it, fuck it, a lot. In fact, I love it so much. There's a great potter in Bristol called Ali W. Pottery, I think. Do you know her? And she just did these brilliant plates over COVID, and it was just like, fuck COVID. And then she did this plate, and I saw it and it said, fuck it, I'm out. No, fuck this shit, I'm out. So I bought it. It's got pride of place in. I'll just pop the mic there. I've got a new mic, podcasting mic. I'm not used to it. And so it's got pride of place on my mantelpiece. Maybe I'm mantelscaping, who knows? But you can't read it unless you know what it says. So hopefully the in-laws won't be too disturbed by it.
Travel's been a huge interest, and we've spoken about some of the places you've been and lived, but what is your favourite place or holiday destination?
Oh my goodness, how can you answer that? I mean, there's just too many places. I love Asia. I'm definitely an Asian girl. That sounded weird, but I mean, I'm definitely happiest when it's hot and there's street food and there's culture around. So I would have to say Mauritius because I'm half Mauritian. I would have to say Maldives because there's nowhere else like it and it's sinking basically. So, you know, to see it is quite a precious thing. And Japan, because I lived there for a year. My dad lived there and my brother is half Japanese. Another long story, but Japan is an incredible place. It continually blew my mind when I was there. Every single moment was like, what? What? This is crazy. So Japan and the rest of Asia.
Music again has been a common theme in today's interview. You've mentioned some of the music at the time where you studied, the kind of cultural shifts and in music history and at particular times of your life, but who is your favorite music artist and what would you cite as your favorite album?
You've got to stop asking me these questions. Favorite film? No, I can't.
They're ridiculous questions.
Favorite cultural icon? Can't answer. Favorite country? I can't answer.
I could name 10 favorite films, maybe 20, but not one.
All right, what's your favorite film? You tell me that first.
Yeah, I'd say my favorite film of all time, if I had to cite one, is probably Once Upon a Time in America, the Sergio Leone gangster epic. That's 4 hours long, is set in the Jewish ghetto during Prohibition.
I don't think I've seen that.
It's about young boys growing up in New York, and they become criminals, and it starts at the end, and it's Robert De Niro and James Woods and Elizabeth McGovern, who's gone on to
is it a couple of years old, or is it older than that?
1984, so we're looking at
it's going to be good.
Nearly 40 years.
It's made in the 80s. I mean, we are big 80s fans here, so thank you for letting me flip the script there.
It's a great film if you've got 4 hours spare. It's an incredible film.
Well, I'm going to put that on my list, but thank you for answering that. So I cannot answer my favorite artist. All I can give you, I mean, I used to be really massively into music, right? I would consider myself somebody that loved music. And yet, since I've had children, iTunes and digitizing music has killed my collection. I've got the vinyl I've got left is there, but I never have time to play it. Then everything else was on my iPod from years ago. And there was I've been trying to track down an album called The Black Sessions by Andrew Bird, which I loved, and I can't find it anywhere. So now I've lost that. You know, there's sort of random stuff from clubs that I went to in Tokyo. There's a club called Yellow, which was brilliant club. I was talking to Bill Brewster recently, who I voiced for, who's a DJ. He just released a book, I think maybe on White Rabbit. And we were talking about how brilliant Yellow was, and I've lost all of that music. And so I sort of need a music person to come in and just sit with me and set up all my music and tell me how to do it, because I don't have the time. So I'm sort of more interested in art lately, which sounds wanky, but we've got friends who are amazing artists all over the world, especially in America. So I really love looking at what they do. But I'm going around the houses. I worked at the jazz rooms in Brighton for a while, so I have a real affinity for sort of jazz, funk, soul, Marvin Gaye. I mean, who doesn't love Marvin Gaye? There's an artist called Leon Thomas that I really love. He's got an album called Anthology. He's very famous for sort of yodeling. African-American. Terry Callier, who I met when at the Jazz Bop, who has done loads of amazing albums, but there's one album called The New Folk Sound, which is just very soothing. I mean, I can't even answer that question. There are too many artists and records that I love. So I hope that will suffice.
Yeah, and I feel the same. And I rarely listen to CDs these days. The last two, Melissa, the first one, what's your greatest achievement to date?
These answers are not as great and powerful as I would like them to be, but without a shadow of a doubt, it's my children. You know, they are just amazing creatures, and I can't believe that we made them. So I can't think of anything else that gives me as much joy as them. Everything else is just puffery, really. So yeah, my kids.
A lovely answer, and I would say the same thing. Here's the final one. Melissa Thom, how do you wish to be remembered?
As a good mum. That's it. There's nothing else that I want to leave my mark on. I mean, nobody really gives two shits at how great a voice actor I am. I care about it, but I don't think anyone else ever sits there and ponders that question. A good mum and a good wife, but most of all, a good mum.
That is the end of today's Your Take. We've covered so much ground in the last 70 minutes, from Wordsworth to the English language, to literature, to novels, to your break in radio, voiceover work, the businesswoman, the entrepreneur, travel, the many places you've gone and discovered, and also emigrated and lived, America obviously being a key one, the opportunities that have arose from that. So many different areas, and I hope so many more things to achieve as well. But thanks a lot for your time.
Oh, James, it's been great, and it's been so nice to see you again. We used to work together many years ago, so
yeah, it was a long time
I was
ago.
just saying, you look exactly the same. I mean, I'm not kidding. You don't even have any grey hair. You haven't got any wrinkles.
I do, I can assure you. There's grey hairs creeping in. Thank you for your compliments. Very nice of you. Not very good at taking compliments, as you can tell.
Go on, sit back, let it wash over you.
And then lastly, how do we find out more? How do we hear your voiceover work? If anybody's listening that actually thinks they want a career as a voiceover artist, where do they go?
So if you're interested in training to be a voice actor, then you want to go to a BRAVA website. So it's brava.uk.com. If you want to find out more about me, can't imagine why you would, but it's melissathom.me. But the most interesting one is BRAVA. Go and have a look at the BRAVA website, and, you know, feel free to give me a call at any time, even if you just want to chat, because that's really what all this is about. It's just about having a chat and finding out about what's there. And I'm not kidding. If you can get on it, it's the best job in the world.
More creative ideas, I'm sure. Hopefully, touch wood, more business endeavors. I'll keep watching and looking out for what you do next. But finally, thanks again for your time, taking time out of your busy day and being a guest on Your Take.
Oh, thank you, James. You are really welcome. And I look forward to more of your wonderful podcasts as well. It's been great to see how many you've done, and I can't wait to listen to more of them.
Thank you kindly.